Welcome to the last Roy Morgan Weekly Update for 2025. Support for the ALP dropped last week as the expenses scandal dominated the media and led to rising pressure on several senior cabinet ministers. The latest Roy Morgan poll conducted last week, from December 8 to 14, with an Australia-wide cross-section of 1,574 electors, shows support for the ALP was down 2.5% to 30.5% compared to just 3 weeks before. The Coalition was at 27.5%, up 1.5%. One Nation were at a record high 17%, up 2%. The Greens were on 13%, down 0.5%. And independents and other parties were at 12%, down 0.5%. That record high support for One Nation beats the previous record high of 14.5% that was set in June and July 1998. On a two-party preferred basis, support for the ALP last week was at 54.5, ahead of the Coalition on 45.5, the closest result since the federal election in May 2025. It's important to note that all of the interviewing for this Roy Morgan survey was conducted before the shocking terrorist attack on Bondi Beach. We're continuing to interview this week and into January. For the full 4 weeks of December, the ALP holds large leads in New South Wales, Victoria, South Australia and Tasmania. There's little to split both major parties in Western Australia, and the LNP is now ahead in Queensland. Looking again at the entire 4 weeks, the ALP has maintained a large lead among women at 58.5%, well ahead of the Coalition on 41.5%. The gap's far closer among men, with the ALP on 52.5%, only holding a narrow lead over the Coalition on 47.5%. Analysis by age shows a clear split between those aged under and over 50. Under 50, the ALP holds a large two-party preferred lead. Over 50, the Coalition is narrowly ahead. Now, for the month of December, the latest Roy Morgan government confidence shows 52% of Australians say the country's going in the wrong direction. Only 33% say the country's going in the right direction. So government confidence is only 81 in December, well below 100. And now to our weekly metrics, starting with consumer confidence. The decline in consumer confidence has continued for a second straight week after the Black Friday sales. ANZ Roy Morgan consumer confidence is down 2 points to 81.5. When the Reserve Bank cut interest rates 4 months ago in August 2025, consumer confidence jumped above 90 for the first time in years. But since then, consumer confidence is down nearly 10 points. There was a decline in buying sentiment for a second straight week following the Black Friday sales. However, the indicator really dragging down confidence is our pessimistic views on the Australian economy over the next 5 years. Now, only about 9% of Australians say they expect good times for the Australian economy over the next 5 years, while over 3 times as many as that, 29%, say they expect bad times. That creates a net rating of minus 19.9 on this indicator, the lowest rating for nearly 35 years, in fact since January 1991, and a record low for the weekly index. This indicator is almost 36 points lower than the high of 16% in January 2021 during the middle of the pandemic. And interestingly, the indicator reached a record high of 45%, plus 45% in August 2009 during the global financial crisis. Perth is Australia's most confident major city. The monthly ANZ Roy Morgan Consumer Confidence measure shows Perth at 89.5, ahead of Sydney on 87.5 and Melbourne on 84.7. The city with the least confidence might come as a surprise to some, but it's Brisbane on only 82.8. ANZ Roy Morgan inflation expectations are unchanged at 5.6%. This means Australians expect inflation of 5.6% in each of the next 2 years. That's a 2-year high for the third straight week. Now, a deeper analysis of business confidence, focusing on businesses in the mining industry, shows a strong recovery in confidence in the second half of 2025 after plunging earlier in the year. The movements match up with broader policy discussions, especially from the Trump administration, which threatened tariffs on many exporters early in 2025, before stepping back from the larger threats and then talked up more mining deals, and especially for critical minerals and rare earths from mid-2025 onwards. Australia, of course, has one of the largest untapped deposits of critical minerals and rare earths in the world. And as these discussions ramped up and led to a deal signed in October, mining confidence soared from 95 in the 6 months to July 2025 to 118.2 in the 6 months to November 2025. A substantial increase of 23.2 points. Broader business confidence continued to decline during this period. Analysing the results more closely shows it's the smaller mining businesses in the mining industry with annual revenue below 5 million that have really driven this increase. Confidence for these small businesses has increased by a massive 39.8 points since the mid-year to 131.1 in the 6 months to November. And finally today, and this year, to some important news on Christmas and Australian spending habits coming into the holiday season. Roy Morgan, in conjunction with the Australian Retailers Association, forecasts total retail spending of $72.4 billion in the pre-Christmas period this year. That's effectively the 6 weeks running into Christmas, and it's up 4% on a year ago. 68% of Australians, that's the majority of us, 15.9 million people, are buying Christmas gifts this year and spending a total of $12 billion on those gifts, up 200 million on a year ago. This includes average spending of $757 each on gifts. And 35 to 49-year-olds are the biggest average spenders. They're set to spend $853 each on Christmas gifts. Finally, a quick reminder of some of the Roy Morgan findings for this year. You might remember, it's official. Social media is ubiquitous among 14 to 15-year-old Australians. We reported over 620,000 problem gamblers in Australia, and that the majority of them are aged under 35. Growing majority of Australians believe AI creates more problems than it solves. We reported the Sydney Football Club is again the most widely supported A-League club. Brisbane Broncos and Melbourne Storms are the most widely supported NRL clubs, and the Sydney Swans are Australia's most widely supported AFL club for 20 straight years. We also reported migration concerns surge post-pandemic, almost returning to pre-pandemic levels. We reported 21% of Australians believe homosexuality is immoral. We also identified and reported a dangerous convergence, disaffection, and the rise of sovereign citizens. Crime concerns surged post-pandemic to highest levels in more than a decade. We reported that distrust puts the brakes on the Australian economy. Woolworths and Coles moved from the most trusted brands to the most distrusted brands. And we reported that Bunnings is Australia's most trusted brand. Finally, we'll remind you, AI promises the world, Roy Morgan actually delivers. One of our clients, Simmons Homes, saw 2.3 times more conversions, 40% more cheaper leads. We reported the continued rise of Temu and Amazon, each gaining close to 1 million shoppers in the last year. Shein also gained over 500,000 shoppers. And that online marketplaces are leading Australia's low price perception shift, with cheap becoming even cheaper. Thank you for listening all year. We at Roy Morgan wish you all a wonderful festive season. and we'll be back in the new year.